What is a legacy worth? For a band that defined itself by fighting the system and standing for more than just record sales, what's the price tag for integrity? Is it $1 million, $5 million? How about $10 million? In 1995, one of the greatest bands in rock history was forced to answer that very question. The stage was set for a monumental comeback, a reunion that would have shaken the music world, but it never happened. One man with one word ensured that the Clash would remain just an explosive memory. Because you guys requested it, today is a story of the massive payday that almost brought the Clash back together and why Joe Strummer walked away from it all. To understand why a $10 million reunion was even on the table, you have to get how the Clash ended. It wasn't a clean break, it was a messy, drawn-out disintegration. The Clash didn't so much break up as they basically evaporated, leaving a void in music that was never truly filled. The classic lineup of Joe Strummer, Mick Jones, Paul Simonon, and Topper Headon had conquered the world with albums that redefined rock music, from their raw self-titled debut to the sprawling masterpieces of London Calling and Sandinista. They were a band that mattered. They had the substance, the style, and a political conscience. But the fire that fueled their creativity also led to their burnout. By 1982, drummer Topper Headon, whose incredible skill set let the band jump between funk, reggae, and jazz, was fired for his escalating heroin addiction. And a year later, the band's musical architect, Mick Jones, was unceremoniously sacked by Strummer and manager Bernie Rhodes. That central partnership, the Jagger Richards or Lennon McCartney of the punk generation, was severed. Strummer and Simonon carried on with a new lineup for one final, critically panned album, Cut the Crap, before it all fizzled out by 1986. No farewell tour, no grand announcement, just silence. The last gang in town was gone. By the mid-90s, the members had scattered. Mick Jones found major success with his band Big Audio Dynamite. By the way, do you guys want me to do a video on that group? Let me know in the comment section below. Simonon returned to his first love, painting, becoming a respected visual artist, while Strummer seemed a little bit more adrift, acting in films and briefly fronting the Pogues, but the shadow of the Clash loomed large. Despite the ugly splits, some friendships had been cautiously mended in the subsequent years. Joe and Mick were talking again, but a full reunion was far from a sure thing. Bassist Paul Simonon was firmly against the idea, later saying he wasn't, I quote, pissed off when big money was brought up, and that he'd rather project the band's legacy than squander it. Still, a punk rock revival led by groups like Rancid, Green Day, and The Offspring happened by the mid-90s, and it had a new generation discovering the Clash. The timing seemed perfect for a comeback, and one of the biggest cultural events of the decade was about to come knocking with an offer that seemed almost impossible to resist. The mid-90s was the absolute peak of alternative rock culture, and its traveling heart was Lollapalooza. What started as a farewell tour for Jane's Addiction had become a massive culture-defining circus that crisscrossed North America every summer. It wasn't just a festival. Lollapalooza was a snapshot of the era. 1995 is often called the festival's greatest year. The lineup was a who's who of 90s cool. The godparents of noise rock Sonic Youth, Courtney Love and Hole were at the height of their fame, the slacker rock of Pavement, the genius of Beck, and the incendiary hip-hop of Cypress Hill. It was a lineup that was both commercially potent and artistically uncompromising. But Lollapalooza's organizers wanted something more. They wanted a legend, an act so monumental it would elevate the entire festival into a historic event. Their white whale was the Clash. They tried before for 2 years unsuccessfully, but in 1995 they put their money where their mouth was. The offer was staggering for the time, close to $10 million for the classic lineup of the Clash to reunite and headline the tour. For the first time, some of the band members were actually considering it. Mick Jones in particular was reportedly keen about the idea. His manager Gary Kurfürst told the LA Times if the Clash was going to reunite, Lollapalooza would be a great vehicle, while stressing that nothing had been decided yet. The pieces, however, seemed to be falling into place. A punk revival was in full swing, a new audience was waiting, and a life-changing payday was on the table. The LA Times reported in 1995 that if the reunion does happen, the band may have to hire a temporary drummer because the group's original drummer, Topper Headon, may have legal difficulties getting into the country. He was recently released from jail in England after serving a sentence for drug charges, they wrote. Jim Gwarnot, who is the manager of The Offspring, told the same paper, young kids would say, the Clash, I gotta see this. It has to be 10 years since they've toured and there's a whole new generation of fans. For a moment, it felt inevitable, but the organizers and Mick Jones had forgotten to account for one crucial, unmovable variable. Joe Strummer. The dream of a $10 million Clash reunion died in a single decisive moment. When the offer was presented to Joe Strummer, his rejection was immediate and absolute. For Joe, this wasn't a business decision, it was a moral one. Strummer deeply suspected authority and headlined a festival sponsored by major corporations, playing anti-establishment anthems to a generation, learning about rebellion through heavily marketed channels. To Strummer, it smelled like a trap. It reeked of compromise. Strummer was fiercely protective of what the Clash represented, and their story was one of struggle, conviction, and a fiery end. It was pure. It hadn't been diluted by decades of lackluster reunion tours. Strummer stated about the reunion, "You can't put something together for money that was originally for an idea. We could probably knock up a few gigs, but it's not going to do anything for the world, is it? Creatively, you're really the searchers on a chicken in a basket tour. If you're confronted with a choice, take $1 million for the death of an artist, or you can live as an artist forever. Maybe you're going to take the second option." Paul Simonon echoed this sentiment years later, stating, "It's a better story at the end of the day that we didn't get back together. It seemed like we would have squandered what we'd achieved by reforming." He argued that most bands reform for one reason, adding basically everyone's broke. For both Strummer and Simonon, a reunion under these circumstances felt like a betrayal. It would have turned the Clash from a vital historical force into a museum piece trotted out for money. The band that wrote career opportunities would be selling out on the biggest stage imaginable. The contradiction was just too much. Simonon told Mojo, "There was talk between me, Joe, Mick, and Mick's manager, but it didn't happen for a lot of reasons. I was getting pissed off with Mick. I said, I don't want to do it. Mick said, why not? You'll get £1 million. That pissed me off even more. So I said, I don't want £1 million. I think he was a bit shocked I wasn't keen on the idea. And I don't think Joe would have really wanted to do it either. For me, the Clash story was over. Joe had also moved on. He was always looking forward, famously saying the future is unwritten. He didn't want to spend his energy trying to recapture the past. A reunion, no matter how lucrative, would have been a step backwards. A concession about his best days were behind him. And Joe Strummer never made concessions. The $10 million wasn't a lifeline, it was an anchor. With the Clash refusing to reunite, the Lollapalooza deal was dead. Perry Farrell, the festival's co-founder, later confirmed they'd gone after Neil Young and Snoop Dogg, as well as the Clash. The dream of seeing Strummer and Jones on stage in '95 soon vanished. Sonic Youth and Hole took the top spots, and the festival went down as a classic, just one legendary what-if hanging over it. The '95 offer was the closest the world ever came to a full-on Clash reunion, but the final real opportunity came years later, when in March of 2003 the Clash were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This kind of event often gets bands to bury the hatchet for one last performance, and it almost happened. In the months before his death, Joe Strummer and Mick Jones had reconnected creatively and started writing music together again. With the induction looming, the idea of a performance was floated, and both Joe and Mick were reportedly on board. But it was never to be. On December 22nd, 2002, just months before the induction, Joe Strummer died suddenly from an undiagnosed heart defect. He was only 50. His death was a devastating blow that tragically closed the door on any possibility of a reunion. At the Hall of Fame ceremony, the surviving members stood on stage together, but they did not play. Accepting the award, their missing frontman's absence was a profound silence. In his speech, Paul Simonon emotionally referred to Joe as his older brother, acknowledging the life-changing experiences they shared. The story of the $10 million offer is more than just music trivia. It's a story about integrity. They chose to protect their fierce, untarnished memory of the band. As Paul Simonon said, it really is a better story that they didn't get back together. Their refusal cemented their legend in a way that no Lollapalooza performance ever could. It preserved the Clash as a symbol of unwavering principle. They never got old, they never compromised, and they never cashed in. Of course, the what if is tantalizing. What would the Clash have sounded like in 1995? Could they have recaptured the lightning in a bottle that once made them the most exciting band on the planet? I guess we'll never know. Maybe that's for the best. The Clash exists perfectly in the time on their records and in our memories. Their future remains unwritten. If you guys enjoyed the story, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into rock music history. I also want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the Clash made the right decision, or should they have taken the money and reunited for Lollapalooza? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And also let me know if you guys actually saw any of the Lollapalooza '95 shows. We'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.